Athens, Greece. The Eurozone's poorest country is experiencing its worst political unrest in 40 years.
Inside the parliament here, Greece's 300 MPs are voting to pass this hated austerity bill. Ranks of police are here to protect these hated MPs, the hated political class. The demonstrators here are taunting them.
So is the Euro bailout driving Greece to the brink of chaos? Welcome to Greece, the sick man of Europe. The Eurozone's poorest country is now reliant on handouts from the single currency's Northern European heartland to keep vital public services running. But even in a country suffering from an 18% unemployment rate, where people are rummaging through bins for food for the first time since the Second World War, the Euro bailout is deeply unpopular. Many Greeks believe the bailout isn't worth the harsh austerity measures attached to it by the country's creditors, particularly Germany. Many Greeks believe the supposed rescue money goes straight back to French and German banks and corporations. Greece, they say, is paying the price for a bailout of the whole Eurozone. There's a strong current of revolutionary anger in Athens today, against Europe and against the ruling PASOK party. With Prime Minister Papandreou's approval ratings plummeting to below 20%, few in Greece or abroad believe his government can survive for much longer. When we arrived in Athens ahead of the crucial vote to pass the latest round of austerity cuts, even the Ministry of Economic Affairs was under occupation by angry Treasury officials.
This matters all the employees we think that are unfair, and we fight not to take the vote tomorrow in the parliament.
If PASOK fails to pass this bill, the international troika of the IMF, European Commission and European Central Bank will refuse to release Greece's latest €8 billion tranche of bailout money. Without it, Greece will grind to a halt. But most Greeks believe the cost to Greek society is just too high. Now hundreds of thousands of ordinary Greeks, from taxi drivers to school teachers, civil servants and small business owners, are massing in central Athens to protest the latest austerity bill.
We're marching towards Parliament at the head of the main communist union, PAME. This is just one of the many demonstrations going to converge on Parliament today and put their protest towards the Greek government.
Trade union leaders claimed that up to 500,000 people massed in Athens to demonstrate against the government, 1/20th of Greece's population. This was the biggest strike in the country's modern history.
The government to fall to declare elections. Here in Greece the situation is very bad for all people. I am a student, I am a worker too. There is no future for the young people.
Είναι εδώ σύλλογοι, είναι αυτοί οι οποίοι έχουν προδώσει όχι μόνο την πατρίδα, όλο το λαό, δεν αντιπροσωπεύουν το λαό πια.
The last time the protesters tried to occupy the central square facing Parliament, they were beaten and tear-gassed out of the way by armed police. So now we have ranks of demonstrators armed with batons disguised as flags, aiming to protect the demonstrators in the square when they occupy it tonight.
Political violence is nothing new in Greece, but it's hard to avoid the feeling that the country is slipping into chaos. The combination of a weak, hated government, growing poverty, and a sense that the popular will is being ignored makes Greece an explosion about to happen.
The people were shouting, "Down with the PASOK dictatorship." Is that how you see PASOK? Is that how you see the government, a junta?
The government, yes, it's junta. Right now it's junta. Because all these people, they told them to go away. Go away, we don't want you anymore. Go home. And he doesn't want to go home. He sailed us to German and French, and now he's smack us down like a cockroach, you know?
The furious crowd of protesters tries to force its way into Parliament.
There's an ugly mood developing. The protesters are throwing objects at the police, trying to break down the barricades to attack the police. We think this demonstration is going to turn violent very soon. The police have just fired tear gas to break up this section of the demonstration. The protesters are clearing the air. There's very, very strong tang of tear gas in the air. Protesters were throwing rocks, bottles at the police. The police were throwing bottles back at the protesters. Τι θέλεις τώρα?
Τι θέλουμε.
Ναι.
Πόλεμο έχουμε. Στον πόλεμο τι κάνουμε στον πόλεμο. Πολεμάμε τον αντίπαλο.
Αυτό είναι πόλεμο.
Έχουν εισβάλει Άγγλοι, Γάλλοι, Γερμανοί στην Ελλάδα. Μας δριμάζουν καθημερινά. Ό,τι κάνανε το 1944 οι Εγγλέζοι, οι δικοί σου, οι φίλοι οι Εγγλέζοι στην Ελλάδα το 1944 το Δεκέμβρη, κάνε σήμερα Γερμανοί, Εγγλέζοι και οι Γάλλοι. Αυτό κάνετε σήμερα, οι δικοί σας.
We have to make clear who is the enemy. The enemy is the capital, which exploits the workforce. We are here to say that we understand that, and we are not going to allow them to use us for their profits, the capitalists, that is.
Inside the parliament here, the government are desperately trying to force through the bailout measures imposed upon them by Germany, the IMF, the hated Troika. This line of police is the only thing holding back hundreds of thousands of protesters from the Greek parliament.
In the summer, thousands of Greeks set up a protest camp in the central Syntagma Square facing Parliament. They aim to emulate the peaceful protests of Tahrir Square.
Unlike Tahrir Square or Tunis, this is a cross-section of society from school children to pensioners. This is the whole of Greek society in the streets protesting against the government and against the international financing system.
But were broken up by police tear gas. Many Greeks told us that if peaceful protest was no longer possible, then the only means left to them was violence.
Now it happens. You hear in the summer we had all this chemical that we buy from Israel, and we pay for that. That is completely absurd.
I need a job. Jobs not everywhere. Why?
No jobs, no money.
Why?
Nothing.
Why? I have two kids, one kid, 3 kids. They have to put the food, education. How?
It's bad for our country. He's American.
And after the government, if the government go, what comes next?
We got plenty of good Greek men who will be patriots. These people, they're not patriots, they're not Greeks.
You said they're American. What do you mean?
Well, he born in America, he's American citizen. He speaks better American than Greek.
By insisting on austerity, 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 they are leading Greece to a total social explosion, and this is going to lead to a period of sustained social and political unrest, and that is good for no one in Europe. It's not in our interest, but it's not in the interest of neighboring countries, and it's not in the interest of the European Union to have one country in total chaos.
It's true, it is true. There is anger, there is upset, of course. The way of doing business is changing. It's changing because otherwise we will cease to exist as a modern economy.
But they're saying this is going beyond an economic crisis into a crisis of political legitimacy.
Well, an economic crisis is the outcome of a crisis of our set of values and a crisis of the way we do business, and then it reaches the crisis of numbers, which is an economic crisis.
We want the government to fall because they have a very, very horrific past of corruption, which is very important, and people don't trust them anymore. Even if they speak the truth, people doesn't trust them because they have the past that is awful.
We are trying to get rid of the dictatorship of Papandreou and bureaucracy. But all this situation is caused because of the Greek political corruption. No one goes to jail, and the European governments try to exploit this type of corruption because they sell to Greece weapons, expensive weapons, and of course they bribe the politicians, the Greek politicians, to get weapons from European factories. So this is a very good deal, and there is no reason to break it. Greek people try to get a job, okay, but nothing more. We don't steal money. The Greek politicians steal money from the European banks. That's the problem. And now we faced a crackdown from Papadreou because he's a dictator. Papadreou, it's a muppet of maybe from U.S. government, maybe from a European government, I don't know. Germany, French government, yeah. And now we are faced this crackdown. And we need international help about Greek political corruption. It's very difficult to fight this sort of corruption because moves undercover, and we can't fight against that. We need international help.
As the politicians inside the parliament debate the austerity bill in a grueling day-long session, violence breaks out yet again. It's hard to avoid the impression that the Troika's austerity measures are pushing Greek society to the very edge of chaos.
Inside the parliament, the politicians are voting to pass this law, this hated law. The fighting's already started. The police have fired tear gas and percussion grenades. People are calling for ambulances, for doctors. There are injuries already.
Volunteer medics desperately try to save a wounded protester's life. One demonstrator, a 53-year-old trade unionist, was killed in this protest.
What are you treating people? What's the problem? Tear gas? Or?
Because they are having, situations with the police forces. Police forces are very brutal. They hit people. And we have a lot of incidents here. We have to take care.
Οι συμπαραστάτες της κυβέρνησης, αυτοί τόσο καιρό βοηθάνε την κυβέρνηση να περνάει όλα αυτά τα μέτρα.
It's difficult to see how the Greek government can long survive civil disorder like this.
There's fighting going on between anarchists who the communist protesters here believe are agents provocateurs for the police and the communist union here. Percussion grenades are going off. There's a hail of stones here. The socialists here. Go back, go back.
Democracy is destroyed by government.
Yes.
They try to break, to broke our. They try.
They are not ours. They are not ours.
They're not making a protest, my friend. They are cops.
They are police. You're saying? Yes.
They are working for the government. For this one.
What you're watching here is the people doing the job of the government.
As dusk drew in, the Communist Union pulled back from the square. Without their protective cordon, the peaceful protest was doomed to fail.
Fighting still ongoing. The kiosk on fire, people fighting the police, tear gas in the streets. This sign very much sums up the atmosphere here. It says, "You have fear, we have the streets."
The police that failed to prevent the lethal violence in front of Parliament now moved in to clear the square of peaceful protesters. Demonstrators were asking themselves, where do we go from here?
Okay, everybody has a different opinion about how they fight, but in the same union with a radical politic frame, and against their politics, and not only with strikes, but maybe sometimes with violence, but against the state, not against one against another.
In the narrow side streets leading from Syntagma, mobs of angry youths began to attack the police.
It's urban warfare here in the streets of Athens. The rioting has moved away from Parliament to all the streets. It's spread across Athens. The police here, it's a cat and mouse game. The police move forward, then are pushed back under a hail of petrol bombs and rocks. They release tear gas and move back forward. This could go on all night.
There is a very severe change, as I said earlier. And there is a lot of upset and in combination with numbness. And as you may have noticed with people around you, they believe that this is a period that we have to go through, very painful one, but somehow we're going to get out of it.
I would say that Greece is simply the weakest link in the 2008 financial crisis. And this is why Greece is falling apart first. But what is happening here will happen elsewhere. And I just hope that other countries don't get the sort of austerity we have, because I'm watching my society fall apart and it's not a pretty sight.
Inside Parliament, the controversial bill passed with a slender majority. But with growing civil disorder in the streets and anger outside the seat of government, it's difficult to see how Papandreou's PASOK party can actually implement these cuts against the will of the electorate.
If they don't represent you, if they don't represent the Greek people, who are they for? Who are they working for?
None.
Themselves.
They working about the Merkel, about the Sarkozy, about the Obama, about the everything that is all in how you call παγκοσμιοποίηση.
Global.
Yeah.
There's always been a strong current of anti-capitalist and anti-Western opinion in Greek politics. But it's taken the debt crisis to give these ideas such currency among so many Greeks.
A large crowd came here to Parliament, to the very steps of Parliament, confronted the police, saying down with the PASOK dictatorship, down with the IMF, saying Greece is no longer a democracy. Immediately we've been tear gassed. The protest here is being broken up with tear gas. People are saying this isn't an economic problem, it's a political problem.
That's a picture of the Greek democracy, with all these people here not letting us protest against, well, for freedom. We haven't got any rights.
Greece's reforming socialist PASOK government has found itself presiding over the total collapse of the Greek economy and the rapid descent of Greek politics into anarchy. The question now is not will Greece bring down the euro, but will the eurozone destroy Greece?
No one wants their faces to be filmed. Why is that?
I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable anymore, you know.
But everyone says that. Does no one trust the government here?
No, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the things that we took for granted a few months ago or years ago in Greece are no longer, you know, should no longer be taken for granted. We've heard a lot of statements have been made from the government about addressed to journalists and anyone who has has some sort of presence that could be misconstrued by those who watch Greece from abroad. And I'm just afraid that they're going to get even more serious than that.
Now, you've asked us not to film your faces. Other people today have said they've been afraid of being on camera talking about this. Why is that? Is it a climate of fear?
Whatever you say to the press will be altered and picked up from a bulk. So therefore your message won't come through.
Okay, what are you doing here now? What are you trying to achieve here now?
We're trying to upload some photos and videos and news from what has happened today in Athens.
So, are you the media centre for the indignant protesters?
Not exactly. We are persons that worked with the media centre when the protest period was in its high season, let's say.
In the highest point.
In the highest
yes.
point.
The peak.
Now it's we're just some people that decided to go on and do some. We name it grassroots journalism or people's journalism. We are visioning something like that. I guess that the media has played a very dirty role in Greece. They are not producing news for the people, but they are somehow propagating the governmental line or the big corporate line to the people, and yes, people do not trust them anymore.
I mean, yesterday was a mass clearing of the square at about 6 p.m. Loads of tear gas, and it wasn't very pleasant, but a lot of people stayed in spite of the tear gas. No, I was a student. I finished with my studies, and I'm in the job search for about 2 years or so.
Really?
Yeah, I work part-time at a coffee shop. I was a mathematician, and I also had a master's in computer science. But right now it's pretty tight. I took the master's course in Ireland, and then I came back, which was a mistake, but then Ireland is going bust as well.
Now, Greece has a history of fighting for its independence against foreign powers, but is Greece losing its sovereignty today to the IMF, to German banks?
Well, to a big extent, I think it is. I mean, right now there's no saying no to them from our part. It's all yes and yes. They say you do this, we do it. They say you do that, we do it. It's not like our government decided something and we say, okay, we voted.
Now, the government say there's no alternative to the cuts to the IMF austerity program.
I don't think that's not, probably it's the worst possible solution that can be made. I mean, to think that with all the austerity and all the cuts and everything, the debt is going up instead of going down is the first sign of something that's not going well. It should go the other way around. I mean, okay, we could take these cuts and all this pain, but if it was for good, now in 5 years the debt is going to be double if we go with this rate. I mean, that's official. It's not our projections, it's the government, it's the IMF projections. So that's not the way we have to go.
So why doesn't Greece default on the debt?
Because then they have to pay all the insurance the banks have bought. I mean, when you buy bonds, then you buy an insurance if the country goes collapse. And then the banks have to pay all the insurance to the bondholders, and they don't want that. So they try to squeeze everything out of the people first and get rid of the bonds, and then default. I mean, the whole thing happens just to save the banks. It's not about us.
That's who they are, all of them. They're betrayers.